Today we're asking the biggest question in entertainment right now. Can artificial intelligence make a complete movie? Script, cameras, actors, soundtrack. The whole thing. And can it ever reach the level of Tarantino, Ridley Scott, David Lynch? By the end of this episode, you will have a clear answer, and I promise you, it's not the one you're expecting. So let's go. Picture this: you sit down in a cinema, the lights go down, a tracking shot moves through rain-soaked streets so precisely it feels like the camera is breathing. The dialogue cuts like a knife. The soundtrack hits somewhere in your chest before your brain even registers why. 2 hours later, you walk out changed. You don't know what exactly happened to you. You just feel it. Now, what if I told you that entire film was made by an AI? No director, no cinematographer, no actor pouring 3 years of their life into a role, no Quentin Tarantino arguing with the studio for 6 months to keep his ending, just a machine, a prompt, and a render. Could that ever happen? And if it does, what does that mean for cinema, for the people who make it, and for us, the people who love it? Stay with me until the end because I'm going to show you the one thing AI genuinely cannot replicate. And it's not what most people think. Welcome to ABG Talks, the podcast where we think out loud about AI, what it is doing to our world, what it actually means for real people, and what the headlines are not telling you. Today, we're going deep. We're covering the full picture, the history of cinema, how cameras and directors actually work, what great actors really do, and then we're asking whether AI can ever do any of it. And I mean truly do it, not a convincing fake. Not a short clip, a real complete film that makes you feel something. I'm going to take you through 130 years of filmmaking, and by the end, you will understand exactly where AI stands and why the answer is more complicated than yes or no. Let's start at the very beginning. The birth of cinema, what movies actually are. Most people think a film is a story with moving pictures, and technically yes, but that is like saying a Michelin star meal is food with heat applied. Cinema is a language, and like any language, it took generations to develop. It started in 1895, Paris. The Lumière brothers set up a projector in a basement cafe and showed a 50-second clip of workers leaving a factory. People reportedly ran from the screen. They had never seen moving images before. That was year zero of cinema. For the next 20 years, nobody really knew what this medium was supposed to do. Early films were basically filmed theater. A camera sat in one place and recorded a stage performance. Then in 1910s, a director named D.W. Griffith started doing something radical. He moved the camera. He cut between shots. He discovered that if you show a man's face, then a baby, then the man's face again, the audience reads emotion into the man's expression, even if his face hasn't changed. That discovery, the editing creates meaning that doesn't exist in the individual shots, is the foundation of all cinema. Then sound arrived in 1927. The whole language had to be relearned. Actors who had been enormous stars were suddenly unemployable because their voices didn't match their faces. Entire careers ended overnight. New ones began. Then color, then widescreen, then digital. Every technological revolution forced cinema to reinvent itself. And every time it did, the best filmmakers used new tools to say things that had never been said before. And why this matters for AI? It's because cinema is not a recording device. It's a thinking tool. Even technical choice is a meaning-making choice. We need to understand that before we can ask whether AI can do it. Part 2. The craft, cameras, lenses, light, and time. Here is something most people never think about when they watch a film. the physics of what they're seeing. A camera is not just a recording device, it's a perspective machine, and every single choice a cinematographer makes changes the emotional meaning of what you're watching. Take lenses. A wide angle lens distorts space. It makes room feel larger, faces feel strange, the world the world feels slightly off. That is why horror movies use wide lenses for close-ups. Your face on a wide angle looks subtly wrong. Your brain picks that up before your conscious mind does. Your brain picks that up before your conscious mind does. A long telephoto lens does the opposite. It compresses distance, makes crowds feel suffocating, makes a character running toward you look like they are barely moving. That is why war films use these lenses for chase sequences. Then there's film grain, the physical texture of 35 millimeters or 70 millimeter celluloid. Quentin Tarantino still shoots on film, not because he is nostalgic, because the grain is alive. When light hits celluloid, it triggers a chemical reaction. The image is physically made of silver halide crystals. When light hits a digital sensor, it is converted to numbers. They feel different, not because one is better, because they are actually different kinds of images. Roger Deakins, arguably the greatest cinematographer alive, the man behind Blade Runner 2049, No Country for Old Men, has spoken about chasing a particular quality of nature light across entire careers. Entire film have been scheduled around the light conditions available in a specific location at a specific time of year. Ridley Scott's team on Gladiator spent months engineering artificial lighting rings to recreate the exact quality of Roman afternoon sun. And then there's time, the frame rate. Cinema traditionally runs at 24 frames per second. That specific speed, slightly too slow to be perfectly smooth, creates a subtle blur on movement that the human eye reads as cinematic. Peter Jackson shot The Hobbit at 48 frames per second to be more realistic. Audiences hated it. They said it looked cheap. It was technically superior and emotionally worse. All of this is craft, accumulated, embodied, tested over a century, human craft. Now, keep that in your head. We're coming back to it. Part 3, the directors AI would need to beat. We are about halfway through and I have not mentioned AI once since the intro. That is intentional because you cannot understand what AI is up against until you understand what is actually trying to beat. So stay with me because the AI part is coming and it's going to hit differently now. If AI is going to make a real film, it needs to do what the greatest directors in history do. So let's actually look at what that is. Quentin Tarantino grew up in a video rental store in Manhattan Beach, California. As a teenager, he watched thousands of films, not studied them, loved them obsessively. Every film he makes is a conversation with cinema history. The dialogue in Pulp Fiction sounds like no dialogue ever written before, because Tarantino absorbed 40 years of crime films, spaghetti westerns, Hong Kong action movies, and French New Wave, and then fused them into something completely his own. You cannot prompt an AI to replicate that because that synthesis came from a specific human life lived in a specific way. Ridley Scott is a different kind of genius. He's a visual architect. Before he was a film director, he was an award-winning commercial director, and before that he studied at the Royal College of Art. When he made Alien in 1979, he storyboarded every single shot before filming began. Every frame was designed like a painting. The corridors of the Nostromo spaceship feel damp and industrial and ancient because Scott spent weeks with his production designer deciding what kind of rust was on the walls, what temperature the lighting should feel, and how condensation would gather on the pipes. That is not just creative thinking, that's a lifetime of visual education expressing itself. And then there's David Lynch, who's a category entirely his own. Lynch has said that his films come from feelings he cannot explain, that images arrive in his mind half formed: a woman crying in a diner, a red curtain moving in no wind, a road at night with no beginning and no end. And he follows those images without knowing where they lead. Mulholland Drive, which is on virtually every critic's list of the greatest films of the 21st century, does not fully make rational sense. It works because it operates on the logic of dreams, the logic of the unconscious human mind. There is no script you can write to produce that. It's emerged from whatever David Lynch is. Three directors, three completely different approaches. The only thing they share is this: their films could not have been made by anyone else. They are not the product of technique. They are the product of a specific human being. And that brings us to part 4, what actors actually do. People who've never acted professionally often think acting is pretending. You pretend to be sad and tears come out. You pretend to be angry and you raise your voice. That is not acting, that's performing. And the difference between performing and acting is the difference between a photograph of food and something you can actually eat. The greatest screen performances in cinema history: Marlon Brando in The Godfather, Meryl Streep in Sophie's Choice, Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight, Kate Blanchett in almost everything she has ever done. These performances work because something genuine is happening behind the eyes. Something the audience cannot name but immediately recognizes as real. Brando developed a technique called emotional memory, accessing real moments from his own life to feel the emotional truth of a scene. When he delivered the famous lines in The Godfather, he was not pretending to be a grieving father. He was channeling something he had actually felt. The camera picks that up. You cannot fake it at the molecular level. There's a scene in Apocalypse Now, Francis Ford Coppola's Vietnam masterpiece, where Marlon Brando whispers the words, the horror, the horror." That scene was not written the way it was filmed. It emerged from weeks of Coppola and Brando circling each other, improvising, arguing, nearly losing the entire film. The production was catastrophic. Typhoons destroyed sets. Martin Sheen had a heart attack. Coppola himself had a public breakdown. The film almost did not exist, and all of that chaos, that's human suffering and uncertainty, is inside every frame. You feel it without knowing why. AI can generate a digital face that looks like a human face. It can clone a voice with frightening accuracy, but it cannot generate the thing behind the eyes because that thing comes from having lived. Part 5. What AI can already do and the pace of change. Okay, so now we talk about AI, and I need you to put aside whatever you think you know, because the pace of this technology is moving so fast that most people's mental model is already 6 months out of date. AI can write a screenplay right now. Tools like Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever, can produce a feature-length script in minutes. Are they as good as Tarantino's? No, but they're structurally coherent. They follow story logic. They generate dialogue that makes sense. 6 months ago, they were noticeably worse. 6 months from now, they will be probably noticeably better. AI can generate video. OpenAI, Sora, and tools like Runway, Kling can produce photorealistic video clips from a text prompt. Right now, they max out at about a minute of continuous coherent footage, but 12 months ago, that limit was 10 seconds. The curve is not linear, it's steep. AI can clone voices with accuracy that is genuinely difficult to detect. We have already seen this in Hollywood, dubbing films into other languages using AI voice clones of the original actors. Digital de-aging that used to cost $10 million now cost almost nothing. And AI can now replicate specific visual styles. You can prompt a model to generate footage in the style of a Kubrick film or a Wong Kar-wai film and get something that superficially resembles it. AI can score music, original soundtracks in the style of Hans Zimmer or Ennio Morricone or on demand in minutes. AI can edit. AutoCAD tools already exist that suggest edit points based on pacing patterns learned from thousands of films. So, on a technical checklist, AI can now touch every single part of the filmmaking pipeline: script, visuals, actors, music, editing, every box checked. So, why are we not already watching AI films at the cinema? This is where it gets interesting. Part 6: The one thing AI cannot do. I said at the top of this episode that I was going to show you the one thing AI genuinely cannot replicate, and that it was not what most people think. Most people assume AI cannot replicate creativity, or emotion, or visual beauty. And they're wrong. AI can approximate all of those things at a level that is getting harder to distinguish from the real thing. The thing AI cannot replicate is necessity. Every great film ever made was made because someone had to make it. Coppola had to make The Godfather. He was broke. His career was on the line, and he needed to prove something. Spielberg had to film Schindler's List. After 20 years of making blockbusters, he felt an obligation to the history of his own people that he could not ignore. Alfonso Cuarón made Roma because he needed to process his own childhood and his relationship with the woman who raised him. Great films are not constructed, they are urgent. They come from people who have something pressing on them: a grief, a memory, a fear, a question they cannot stop asking. And they make the film because not making it would be worse than making it. AI has no urgency, it has no grief, it has nothing pressing on it. It generates content because it was asked to. It is extraordinarily capable. It is technically impressive, but it does not need to say anything, and you can feel that. There's a technical term in screenwriting: stakes. What does the character stand to lose? What happens if they fail? Every, every story that works has stakes that feel real. When the stakes come from a machine, they feel like stakes. When they come from a human being working through something true, they feel like life. The audience knows the difference even when they cannot name it. AI will make technically complete films. It probably will within 10 years, but a technically complete film and a film that matters are different things. One is a product, the other is an act of communication between a human being and everyone who watches it across time. And here's the honest verdict and what comes next. So, will AI ever make a real movie? Technically, yes, probably sooner than most people expect. Within a decade, there will be a feature-length AI-generated film that gets a mainstream release and finds an audience. I genuinely believe that. Will it be the next Pulp Fiction, the next Blade Runner, or the next Mulholland Drive? No. Not because AI is not powerful enough, but because those films are not about cinema. They're about what it feels like to be alive. And for now, that is still our territory. Here's the thing I want to leave with you. Every single time in history that a new technology threatened to kill cinema, cinema got stronger. Television was supposed to kill film in the 1950s. Instead, it pushed cinema to become more spectacular. Widescreen, Technicolor, epics the small screen couldn't match. Video was supposed to kill cinema in the 1980s. Instead, it created a generation of obsessive film lovers, including a kid in a video rental store who would go on to make Pulp Fiction. Streaming was supposed to kill cinema, and yet, here we are. People are still going to theaters, still sitting in the dark with strangers to feel something together. AI will not kill cinema. The filmmakers who understand both and both the technology and the craft, who use AI as a tool the way Kubrick used the Steadicam or Ridley Scott used CGI, they're going to do the extraordinary things. And the films that matter most will still be the ones made by people with something urgent to say. That is the honest answer, and I told you it was not the one you were expecting. If this episode got you thinking, share it with someone who loves film and cinema. And if you want me to go even deeper on any part of this, the technology, a specific director, what AI is doing to the film industry right now, leave a comment or drop me a message. And I'll see you on the next video.